Hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation part 2. In part 1 we have discussed about the anatomy of temporomandibular joint and TMJ disorders like dislocation, subluxation and their management. Now in part 2 we will discuss about internal derangement and TMJ ankylosis. In order to understand internal derangement, you should know that in a normal joint, the intermediate zone of the articular disc lies over the condyle. This intermediate zone, that is labeled as number 2 in the first diagram, acts as a pressure bearing area as it is devoid of any blood vessels and nerve supply. This position is maintained even during movement, and it is because of three factors. First factor is the morphology of the articular disc, and that is the anterior and the posterior zone. It is thicker than the intermediate zone. Second is interarticular pressure, that is provided by the elevator group of muscles. And third factor is collateral ligaments, also termed as discal ligaments. Now, if there is any alteration in the morphology or if there is any elongation of the discal ligaments, this normal relationship can change. So, internal derangement can be defined as an abnormal relation between the articular disc, mandibular condyle, and the articular eminence. The disc is most often displaced anteriorly or anteromedially, and it is because of the pull of the superior lateral pterygoid muscle. In the second picture, you can see the relation of the condyle and the articular disc in early phase, and in late phase you can clearly appreciate that the posterior part of the disc is in position with the condyle. Now coming to the classification of internal derangement, which was given by Wilkes. Wilkes classified it in 5 stages. Stage 1, it is early reducing disc displacement. It is also referred as disc displacement with reduction. It is characterized by a reciprocal clicking. Reciprocal clicking, it means a second click which occurs during the later stages of the condylar return just before the closed joint position. There will be limited mouth opening and deviation of the mandible to the involved side until a pop or click occurs. When the click occurs, it means reduction has taken place. Next is stage 2, that is late reducing disc displacement. It is similar to stage 1. Here, the patient may describe it as cutting and obstruction. Next is stage 3, that is non-reducing disc displacement. It is also referred as disc displacement without reduction. It is also known as closed lock. Clicking will disappear. There will be limited mouth opening. Patient will complain of pain, and on examination there will be pre-auricular tenderness. And if this stage progresses, it can then lead to chronic non-reducing disc displacement. During the fourth stage, which is chronic non-reducing disc displacement, the posterior attachment will lose its elasticity. There will be thinning and perforation of the articular disc. Joint crepitus will be present, and there will be hard tissue remodeling, which can be seen in radiographs as sclerosis or erosion. Now coming to diagnosis of TMJ disorders is mainly done on the basis of history and clinical examination. So we should take a detailed case history, and thorough clinical examination should be done. The physical findings that may indicate internal derangement are opening and reciprocal clicking, joint tenderness to palpation, deviation to the affected site, pain in the affected joint while biting on a wooden tongue depressor, crepitus, which is often associated with chronic disc displacement, perforation, and degenerative changes, elimination of pain following local anesthesia of the affected joint. So, panoramic imaging is the standard for screening of the jaws, including the general morphology of the condyles. Stage 1, 2, and 3 can be diagnosed easily on the basis of patient's history and clinical examination, but for stage 4 and stage 5, We need radiographic imaging because the mandibular opening is often nearly normal with minimal deviation or lack of lateral excursions. However, it is noted that MRI and arthrography tend to overdiagnose the disc displacement. Therefore, clinical diagnosis should be the ultimate determining factor in the decision to perform surgery. Here is an OPG with erosion of the condyle, left condyle. Now the management of internal derangement is a vast topic. I will enumerate the treatment options. In non-surgical treatment, we have soft diet, application of heat and cold, medications like anti-inflammatories and analgesics, electromyographic biofeedback, ultrasound therapy, then TENS, that is transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, laser, intraoral appliances, occlusal therapy, and patient education. Surgical procedures, we have arthrocentesis and lavage and arthroscopy. Now TMJ ankylosis. TMJ ankylosis is also termed as stiff joint. It is the pathological intracapsular fusion between the head of the mandibular condyle and the articular area of the glenoid fossa. TMJ ankylosis can be classified as unilateral or bilateral, fibrous or bony. Depending on the site, it can be intra-articular or extra-articular. It can be complete or partial. It can be classified as true ankylosis or false ankylosis. Now, etiology. The most important cause is trauma. For example, at birth, TMJ may receive trauma from a forceps delivery. Condylar fractures. Second important cause is infections. For example, otitis media, parotitis, osteomyelitis of the jaw. Next is inflammation, rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis. Systemic diseases like smallpox, scarlet fever, and typhoid. Now, pathophysiology. When there is trauma, there will be extravasation of blood into the joint space, that is termed as hemarthrosis, and then it will lead to calcification and obliteration of the joint space, which will ultimately lead to ankylosis. Now, coming to the clinical manifestations, in unilateral ankylosis, where a single joint is involved, there will be obvious facial asymmetry and deviation of the mandible and the chin towards the affected side. You can see it clearly in the diagram. There is facial asymmetry and deviation towards the affected side. There will be roundness and fullness of the face on the affected side. Crossbite may be seen and some amount of oral opening may be possible. These are the clinical pictures. Now, in case of bilateral ankylosis, mandible is symmetrical but micrognathic. Patient develops typical bird face deformity. This is typical bird face deformity. The neck chin angle may be reduced or almost completely absent, that you can also appreciate from the diagram. In second diagram, you can appreciate the neck chin angle, it is almost completely absent. Antegonial notch is well defined, anterior open bite, and severe malocclusion. Now, diagnosis of TMJ ankylosis. First is history, then a thorough clinical examination. Radiographs like OPG, lateral oblique view, cephalometric radiographs, PA radiographs, and CT scan can help. Now, the radiographic findings. In case of fibrous ankylosis, there will be reduced joint space and hazy appearance, but still the normal anatomy of the joint and the glenoid fossa can be appreciated. But in case of bony ankylosis, there will be complete obliteration of the joint space. Normal TMJ anatomy is distorted in case of bony ankylosis. Now, coming to the management. Management of TMJ ankylosis is always surgical. Now, the procedures that are done for TMJ ankylosis are: first is condylectomy, second is gap arthroplasty, and third, interpositional arthroplasty. Now, condylectomy. Condylectomy procedure, it is done for fibrous ankylosis. For condylectomy procedure, a standard preauricular approach is used, or we can use its modifications. For example, a superiorly extended preauricular approach, that is Al-Kayat approach. A horizontal osteotomy is performed at the level of sigmoid notch. We have to remember that we need to protect the vital structures that are on the medial aspect, especially the maxillary artery. So we will use special condylar retractors, and these are kept in place before the horizontal osteotomy is performed. The remaining condylar stump is then reshaped with a burr to achieve a rounded contour, and then an alloplastic material can be used to maintain the joint space. Next is gap arthroplasty. Gap arthroplasty is done for bony ankylosis. It involves two horizontal osteotomy cuts and removal of a bony wedge for creation of a gap between glenoid fossa and the ramus. It is recommended to create a gap of at least 1 centimeter both medially as well as laterally. Next is interpositional arthroplasty. Gap arthroplasty has been found to be associated with higher incidence of re-ankylosis. To reduce the occurrence of re-ankylosis, interpositional materials are inserted after the resection of ankylosis. So, interpositional arthroplasty involves creation of a gap, but in addition, a barrier is inserted between the two surfaces to avoid reoccurrence of ankylosis, and it is currently the surgical protocol of choice. The interpositional materials can be autogenous, heterogeneous, or alloplastic. Examples of autogenous grafts are like temporalis muscle, costochondral grafts that are used in children less than 15 years of age because of their growth potential. Thank you.